I never used to believe in ghosts. I said that outright, right at the start, because I wanted whoever reads this to know where I was coming from. Skepticism felt clean, logical, practical. Until last week, when something happened to me that I still can't fit into any sensible box. It started on a drive that was supposed to be pleasant. My girlfriend Emily had this idea to avoid flying and take the scenic route to a wedding in New Brunswick. 2 weeks earlier, she'd convinced me with one simple line. Why not see the coast? Fine, I thought. A summer drive through Maine sounded nicer than airports and security lines. It sounded like a story I'd tell later. It sounded harmless. The Atlantic had other plans. A storm rolled in the moment we left Boston. A hard, wet wall of weather that turned the windshield into a staccato of lightning and wipers. Our plan to stop in Portland fell through. A friend had to tend to a sick relative, and by the time we were forced off the interstate, it was late, and the rain had turned the highway into a ribbon of glare. That's when we found the lodge. Found is generous. It was more like we stumbled into it. A U-shaped courtyard of single-story rooms, half the windows and doors boarded up like a place that forgot to keep up with time. A flickering neon sign read, "The Lodge." Its light buzzed a small office window where an old woman sat like a fixture of the room itself. She didn't greet us. She watched hollow eyes, a face that smelled of mothballs and cigarettes before I even opened the door. She did not speak. When I asked if she was open, she only nodded, like a headstone tipping in the wind. She handed me a ring of keys with a tag that said 66. $20 later, I had a key and a growing cold in my gut. You know the scene I'm describing, the one where every filmgoer in the audience is shouting "don't" at the screen. That was me, the idiot character who turned the knob. Room 66 was weirdly modern, whitewashed, a widescreen TV, a little fridge, flowers in a pot that did not match the mildew on the curtains. There was also a locked door at the back of the room, the kind of door you barely notice and then forget about. We showered, collapsed, and somewhere between the thud of the storm and the hum of the TV, Emily slept like a person who could nap through a freight train. I did not. Sometime around 2 in the morning, when the storm had shifted away and the road sounds settled into a distant drone, I woke to something walking on the roof. It wasn't the rain, those were soft and uniform. These were heavy, measured steps pacing above us. At first, I told myself it was a bird, a raccoon, anything that fit within the world of explainable things. The steps grew frantic, then stopped so suddenly, the silence had weight. I went to the bathroom. The hallway light outside painted everything a thin yellow smear. Midway through, I noticed, in the corner of my eye, the bathroom door slowly drifting closed. Not swinging with a breeze, not slamming inching, like a hand pushing it shut. My first, stupid thought was that the floor was slanted. My second, less stupid thought was that if the door closed all the way, whatever was behind it would be closer than the thin wall between me and sleep. I jammed my fingers into the gap and flicked on the light. There was nobody in the bathtub. The tiles were cold and empty. The shower head blinked with a single bead of water. I stood there with fingers pinched, listening to nothing, do nothing. When I opened and closed that door, it stayed put. No tilt, no trick. I went back to bed with whatever unease you get from realizing your brain is inventing a presence in the dark. Then the silhouette walked by the window. Not just a trick of the curtain, but a shape with the solidity of a memory. I woke Emily. She didn't wake. She didn't even stir. Then the parking lot light gutters out. Total dark. Panic has no volume. It's an atmosphere. It sat on my chest like someone had taken the breath and put it in their pocket. A key turned in the lock of the back door, the one we had assumed was a cleaning closet. I don't remember if I screamed. I do remember hearing the small, clinical click of the lock and then a draft of cold that tasted like metal. The door creaked open and a light snapped on in a place that could not have existed. Behind that little locked door, where there should have been drywall and maybe a mop and a half-empty bottle of cleanser, is stretched a corridor. A corridor. The motel was a single-story U. There should have been concrete and the parking lot, and maybe a shrub. Instead, there was a passage that ran away into darkness, doors lined along each side, and each door tagged with the number 666. I walked toward it because my body betrayed me. There are two kinds of fear, the one that roots you to the spot and the one that drags you forward, toward whatever possibility the horror offers. I was in the latter. My feet shuffled down that impossible hallway, and I felt the air change. It wasn't colder so much as denser, as if warmth itself was being squeezed out. At the other end, something glowed red. It pulsed. It felt like watching someone's chest. A living beat. But from a distance, voices came from behind doors. Not random murmurs. Names. Voices I knew. I heard my friend Mark, dead years ago, slam his fist against a door and call me by name. He called it my fault. That image stays with me. A small man in the darkness, blaming me for decisions I never made. I turned and saw Emily in the room behind me. She was standing by the television, hair hanging like a curtain, but her eyes were not the eyes that fell asleep in seconds. They were hollow, vacant, like the old woman's. She pressed a finger to her lips and smiled, and blood leaked from the corners of her mouth and ran over her teeth in slow, viscous lines. When she grinned like that, the world fell away. My throat closed, sound strangled. I could not breathe words, though I tried. The corridor's red glow grew hotter, and the sound from behind doors changed from names to accusations. People I loved and thought I had lost spoke to me from thin rooms that shouldn't exist. They cried and laughed and begged. Time stopped being linear. A minute could have been an hour. I cannot tell you how long I was in there. Minutes melt into each other like wax. I remember thinking I might already be dead. I remember touching the knob of one of the doors and feeling a warmth that was not human. I remember the sensation of being watched by windows that had no glass staring at me from inside painted doors. And then, somehow, I was out of the corridor. I found myself in the driver's seat of the car on the shoulder of I-95, shaking so hard my vision blurred. Emily lay across the passenger seat, unconscious and pale as paper. There was a smear of something dark on her lips. I drove without thinking, some part of me only capable of steering and breathing and hitting the next exit. We made it to the nearest town, where I stumbled to a house and pounded on the door until someone with a phone called 911. Medical teams came. Emily was taken, airlifted to Maine Medical Center. They told me later she was in a coma. They called it medically induced to manage swelling. I called it something else and kept getting the same blank faces in return. I gave a statement to the police. They took down what I said with the polite, disbelieving patience reserved for lost drunks and fevered kids. An officer told me the lodge burned in the 60s, that it had closed after a man killed his family one long night. Some stories stick around, she said. I don't know which is worse, the suggestion that I invented my terror, or the implication that it fit into a pattern so well documented it had a history. Emily's family thinks I did something to her. People will talk. The internet will whisper. People will say I had a psychotic break, or that I slipped into a fugue and did something terrible, or that grief and guilt have a cruel way of fabricating memories to punish us. Those are tidy explanations. Clean, they have edges, but tidy explanations do not have a corridor with 666 on every door. They do not have an old woman who never spoke once but watched like a relic built into the building. It's been a week. Emily sleeps in a hospital bed under machines that map her breaths. Doctors ask me questions about her medical history, about toxins, about seizure risk. I answer because it's what people do. I sleep poorly. I wake and see that corridor behind my eyelids. I wake and think of hands on doors and voices in rooms that shouldn't exist. I keep thinking about the number on the tag, 66. Why 66? Why 666? Numbers are too neat to be accidental. I am telling this because I have nowhere else to put it. Friends stop returning calls when your story is too jagged. Family hovers with quiet, worried faces. I'm allowed to be suspected. I'm allowed to be accused. The police record the facts, while their eyes skim to the part of the report that looks like madness. I know how it sounds. But I felt the draft of that corridor, heard the pulse at the end of it, and watched the woman I love stand in my room with empty eyes and blood lining her mouth. Maybe I am mad. Maybe this was a dream I slept through in a motel whose end times decor leaked into my head. Maybe the truth rots, somewhere in the closet behind a locked door marked 66. Maybe I am still in that corridor writing this would be a way to pass the time between knocking and silence. If you ever find yourself on a stormy road and a neon sign blinks at the edge of your vision, if an old woman watches you with eyes that seem to belong to a photograph rather than a person, remember this. Some doors were meant to stay closed. Some keys should never be turned. That night changed me. I do not know whether Emily will wake. I do not know if the police will ever accept anything I say. I do not know if anyone will believe that in one quiet room, in the middle of a motel that shouldn't have corridors, a passage crawled open and offered me a choice. I don't know what I chose, only that now I cannot unsee the corridor and cannot unsmell the mothballs that clung to that woman like a second skin. If you take anything from this, take the small, sensible thing. If a place looks like it belongs fixed to yesterday, if its sign buzzes and the attendant does not speak, get back in the car. Drive until your headlights burn new road into the dark. Don't turn any keys you don't intend to carry with you. And if, on a stormy night, you hear footsteps pacing on a roof above your head, do not make the mistake I did. Don't follow where your body wants to go. Because some doors don't lead to rooms. They lead to corridors that keep the voices of people you thought were gone and whisper your name until you open whatever door is waiting for you. If this story kept you up at night, imagine what's waiting in the next one. Make sure to hit subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss it. And tell me in the comments, would you dare spend a night at a place like this? Until next time, stay in the light.